So, thank you for agreeing to this interview. My name is Mosunmola Ogunmolaji, and I'm with
Katie Delk.
Okay, so we're from the Summer Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida.
Wonderful.
And today I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Andrew Davey, and we are currently at the Hammock, Gainesville, Florida. So we'll just get right into it. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where were you born? When were you born?
New York City in 1967. Originally from New York City in that area. Moved down to Florida in 1981. Attended the University of Florida, a very fine school. I'm sure you've heard of it. From about 85 to 89. Undergraduates and then graduates, and North Florida, where I got my master's in accounting. First job after college was in a site like OHOP, the actual CCRCs. These are special. It's actually unique. You've probably heard them from other people talking about it, but everything you see here is kind of tied together by an actual contract sold kind of through the state. It's an actual insurance company. You can come here and see the courts, the pools, the everything else, but we really are an insurance company. And I was the accountant behind the scenes of that first place that took care of all that piece of it. I worked through Fleet Landing for 5 years, and then worked for the company that built Fleet Landing for 7 or 8 years, and then I ended up with Praxis, which is the company that then helped to actually develop here at OHOP. So after having helped build about 8 places, 6 to 7 places like this around the states, and I guess working in 3 or 4 states, ended up with Praxis, and in 2003, I started working with them. They brought me on specifically to help set up the business office here and at the site that was being opened right before it, the Glenridge. The 2 sites were in some ways basically the same. They were the same type of, I guess, model, the same build, and I was kind of brought on to run the back office, to hire people to make, I guess, the payroll, the bills, the accounts receivable. All of that was kind of what I had to set up in 2003. And to build the teams, to hire the people, and to kind of support the whole thing going on. The Glenridge, the site that was just before this one, opened about 6 months, a bit earlier, was slightly larger. We opened up OHOP here in 2004. The bonds, they had got started before I joined the team, so the bonds had already closed. About $110, $120 million in debt that was kind of brought on to kind of, I guess, finance and build. And I was part of the team then that was making sure it was getting built and everything was getting done. They kind of a turnkey approach. The board worked with Praxis, and we had a team kind of that took care of all these other elements to kind of make sure this place got open. And at the same time, we're opening up this other site at the same time. So the 2 of them are very much the same in some ways in terms which look behind the scenes. They don't look the same, but all the elements that you have there are almost identical. Again, to kind of build the site that, again, looks like, all, I guess, these fantastic things you see here, but from my end, how I see it, it's an actual insurance company. We're selling long-term care, it's actual insurance. And a lot of people, even when they buy into it, they don't always see that point when they come in here, what they're really buying. They buy the contract to come in here, and they get to live here, and the food and the housekeeping, all the fantastic things. But also, when the time comes and they need this actual long-term care, they can have it here on site at a wonderful health center that's right in back of us here, that they have, in essence, prepaid that cost. So a lot of people don't know. Some may never use it. Some may use it for 10 years. And when they go over there, they're paying a cost that's much, much lower than what they would pay if you came in from this outside. And that's kind of the whole model here of what we have, that someone pays a large fee up front and they buy insurance. Kind of got off the road there, didn't I? So my part of the story then is I'm kind of the guy who keeps the books. I have a team that kind of keeps the books, keeps this money. And I was brought on in 2003 with Praxis. I functioned here as, I guess, actually CFO. So I pretty much was in charge of the office, though I wasn't an employee of OHOP. I worked with this firm, Praxis, and worked for them until about 2017. So during that time, I wasn't here full time, but I'd be here 2 or 3 days a week, here for all the important things, whether it's audits, or the important things to me, maybe not important to the folks who live here, but the audits, the budgets, the big pieces, working with the board, kind of to execute what their thoughts, the actual policies that they wanted to have here. And so was working with them through 2017 when the board went to self-manage. And at that point, they asked me to kind of stay on. So that's when I left Praxis and became an employee of Ocam, which I've now been for about 5 years. I've been pretty much involved or employed in one way or the other by Ocam since it opened, since the year before we opened.
So I was just curious what you studied at the University of Florida and what got you interested in communities like this. You mentioned earlier that you helped build places around the States. I'm curious if you could talk about your beginnings a bit more.
So I studied accounting, and I got my master's in accounting, and yes, that's a real thing. People really do that. So by chance, by luck, a site just like this, I guess actually Fleet Landing, was getting ready to open. And I was just getting out of school, was going to start I guess my master's at night, but wanted some I guess money to live. I took this job there and not really, I guess, realizing what it was. And it was about 2 months from getting opened. And I kind of helped participate in all the things it took to get the back office part of it opened. And found I loved it. Within the first year, pretty much the entire staff that I had come in with had all quit in the office there. And I got a chance to do everything. I was doing the payroll. I did the accounts receivable. By the end of the year, I ran the office, and what a great way to start. You know, here you are fresh out of school, and you've got a job that's already at that next level. So it was really kind of a neat thing. I was, starting to make more money, have more things I could do. I said, this is really neat. And from my standpoint, the actual accounting of it is incredibly interesting. It is a cross-section of all these actual industries in it. There is healthcare. There is the dining, there's a large plant. There's actually public financing. I spend a lot of my time to work with the bondholders and the banks that have put money into this. And so a lot of my time is spent to interact with them to secure that money. We just closed on some new debt this actual past year, and we're going to save about $1.2 million a year by what we just did last year, and it's going to roll over into this year too, and then each year they're on out. So my work evolved into these really neat spots. And again, the bookkeeping part of it was just not just one thing. There's this restaurant, healthcare, housekeeping, a large part. There were so many neat things to kind of learn and to do. The second insurance company aspect of it. I mean, at times I felt like I had to know the actual insurance industry because we were selling policies to people here, and I had to be the one to explain that. I guess the actuary part of it. I mean, I've got to know or have a good idea of how many people here are going to die in a year, or how many people will get sick. So we'll know what we need to use, what we need to have. Do we have the beds here to take care of it? Do we have the money in the years to come to take care of the promise that we have there? People move in here and say, you're going to take care of me. Well, are you really going to be here in 3-5 years? And part of my job, part of our job is to make sure that's true, that we're going to be here to have that, I guess, promise met, that you'll be able to stay here and not have to leave because we don't have the money or the care to take care of you. I guess actually nonprofit part of it was also a piece that actually drew me in, that in some ways you don't have to worry about this entity. There aren't stockholders trying to take money out. Now the firms I worked with to build these things were actually for profit, and they obviously had their own, for-profit means to it, but these entities themselves, the Ocam, the Fleets, all the other ones I helped build, non-ICE profit. So everything we made, we kept here to make the plant better, to make the lives better, to get, I guess, the mission done. And it does have this mission. And to take care of the staff. I mean, it's a great place to work in that sense. And you don't have to worry, the stockholders, I guess the owners are going to take money out. And that doesn't happen here. What money we make in stays here. And that actually attracted me. The other thing that kind of brought me back down from doing what I did before, where I would travel around the world, I guess the country, helping to build these things, is that every day I get to interact with someone here. And it is really kind of neat that I get to help somebody. I'm not just, on the phone, on the books. There's someone coming into my office saying, can you help me with this? I've got a tax issue, my kid, and you get to see the people you're helping. One-on-one, someone comes in and you're able to help them. There are actual grandparents, I guess parents at this age that, that live here. And most of them are just the nicest people that have had the most incredible lives. I mean, they've done things and been places, and they have stories to tell. Most of them, 95% just the nicest people ever. And the other 5 are not so happy, but that's just kind of the way of the world. So having that touch across the desk to be able to interact with someone is really one of the things that helped draw me in and keep me in. So it intrigues my brain, but it also, intrigues my heart.
So I'll just take us back to when you joined or when you started working with the Hammock. What do you think was one of like the major financial decision that they had to make at that earlier stage?
Well, in the very, very beginning that they had to make, I mean, we had to convince these banks to lend money to a nonprofit that was a type of entity that if these banks ever had to foreclose, there was no way they could shut a place like this down and take their cash out. It would look so bad for any bank or bond fund to say, we're going to shut down a retirement community and skilled nursing facility. So there's a lot of risk. You've got to have the right banks. You've got to woo the right banks. You've got to let them know, we're going to run this place well enough that you don't have to worry about that, that you're going to get your money back. And that's part of where I have to translate our world. I have to talk to the people who live here a certain way and let them know. I've got to talk to the bankers in that language that keeps them happy, saying, yes, we will do the right things. We will raise the rates here when we have to raise the rates. And we do each year because that's the smart thing to do to keep this business going. That we're going to raise rates. We're going to keep it, in the black. And we're going to make sure you're going to be okay, banker, because you're the one who just lent us $120 million to build this with really no actual equity, other than what a few other sub-debt that came in from folks who work with the schools. So there's an incredible risk that they take. And now when we open, we have to pay more for that risk. What it cost on our debt was much, much higher. Now what we pay on our debt is a lot less. Just this past year, we were able to get, actually bond rating for the first time since we opened. A bond rating, I don't know if you all have lived in this world, but when you buy a bond, it has a certain grade to it. As you would expect, an A bond is better than a B bond, and so on. And there's a line, it's actually investment grade bonds, and the other bonds that are under that is what you would call in the past junk bonds. You've probably heard that term. Below investment grade bonds, let's just call them that. We went for an actual bond rating as we were doing some new bonds, and we're kind of there on the cusp. We're not like a big company, we're not expecting something great, and we came out much better than we thought we would. We got a BBB, bond rating, which is very solid for an entity of this size. I'd say only 20% of the sites like us in the country, of which there's maybe 1,000 to 1,200, have that type of, bond rating, which again, is part of what my job is, to make sure the balance sheet is good and solid. That as time goes on from when we started to where we are now, we have moved to a place of strength, and that if bad things happen, pandemics, whatever, that we're able to weather the storm, that we're able to get through this because we have the strength. The balance sheet will hold up. So when it's a bad year, but we're fine. We don't have to let staff go. We don't have to change this program. We can live up to the promise that we've had, the promise that's been the same since we first opened.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have a direct answer to this, but the question is going to be where did the idea of the Hammock stem from?
So I know the president of the school must have seen or heard or talked to people, because there are other places like this here, and this dates a little bit before me, but I know somewhere the president, John Lombardi, had talked with the actual developers that I worked for, the Jim Caters, Matt Weavers, John Corbin. And I think they helped encourage. I think he had put together a task force here at the school too that had kind of gone to look at it. So somehow the interaction, they thought this was a great idea. They had found Praxis, and then they said, we know what to do. We know how to get this done for you. So a little of that predates me, so I don't know exactly the steps that went through to kind of bring it to. And Matt Weaver, when he comes, probably will answer. He was with the company back then at the very start, so he'll probably say where the origin came from. But I know it started with and it wouldn't have happened without him. We tried to open other places like this at other schools. Florida State, I don't know if we want to speak of them. They're a good school. I have 2 daughters going there, so it's a great school. But we tried a couple years later to build something just like Ocam, to take this model as it was and to build it up there. And it didn't succeed. It didn't get the pre-sales it needed to kind of go ahead, where you'd be at the point where I could go to the banks and say, we got what we need to kind of build this. And part of it was the actual commitment from the school wasn't the same. The school didn't commit the way the school here did. The school here, through the actual foundation and through friends of the school, they helped guarantee some of the debt when we started up. There was, I'm sure you've heard the story of Frank Duckworth, who gave some of the money up front to do the study. And we've named the Duckworth Plaza, after him at the very center here, but he gave about $200,000. I know there's much more to this detailed than I know, but somehow someone asked me, said, oh, here's a check for $200,000. And that was used to do the upfront, these planning studies to see if this would make sense. So he gave up his money, not wanting to get it back, and these came back saying to the school saying, yeah, this would fly here, this would work here. When the bonds first closed, they then were going to pay him back that money, and he said, keep it, start the fund to help people here who run out of money. I guess actually the endowment, benevolent fund. So he put the first $200,000 into that, and it's now since grown to about 1.5 million. Wow. People continue to give money to the fund, and this is the fund we use to help anyone here who's outlived their assets. You know, part of the promise we have here is that if you move in here, we never want you to move out. You know, we want to take care of you. So if you run out of money, we're going to take care of you. And we have this fund set aside to do just that. So we don't have to raise rates on the people who live here. Now, part of my job too is to screen people to make sure that doesn't happen, because we would not be doing well if everyone, I guess, needed help. But we have this fund, and over the years we probably have about, I guess actually 3 people now here through no fault of their own, have outlived their assets. Maybe the crash of '08 hurt a lot of people. And so we're helping them a little bit to make sure they can maintain lifestyle, they can stay here, and they can live out their lives just how they actually meant to. Not for profit is what we do. You know, again, it'd be hard to do if we had 100 people like that, but we have a fund that we built, and it started with that money that Frank gave way back in the day, so to kind of get that started.
Yeah. I was just going to ask how do you evaluate to know, because if you continue that way of, giving out funds to people, how do you then manage the fund so it covers everybody? But then you provided answers to that.
Right, we really do. We really do try to screen them. So I kind of do a test where I judge risk and saying, what's the risk? No, you never know. The crash of '08 hit the balance sheets of a lot of people who moved in here actually before them quite a bit. They may have been too heavily in stocks, actually real estates, and so they may have gotten hurt. And then if they outlive what we think your life expectancy is, folks who live here will live a little bit longer than average. Part of it's the actual wealth effect. They have the money to get the best health care, or they've made good actual choices their whole life. They're the planners who come here. They've done things during life and they've seen certain stuff and they know to go to the doctor. They know to, so the life expectancy of someone here will be a little bit longer. Now, we like to take the credit for that. It's the good food, it's the exercise, it's the activities, the engagement, the social engagement. We can't overlook that. I mean, one of the big selling points we have here through the school and through everything else is all the classes that come here. I mean, all the activities and things that go on to keep people active, stay in motion. A body in motion stays in motion. A body rest stays at rest. And there's so many activities. And a lot of them, they run the activities too. They come up with the programs. They come up with the plans, the classes, everything that they would like to do, and help us run it. And that, by tailoring it to what they want, I guess working with the school and all the elements there, they're able to create an actual environment that suits their needs. Hopefully. I mean, you can't fit for everybody. There's 380 people here in the IL, maybe 100 over in the health center. So there's a lot of different ideas and minds and people with thoughts. Did I answer the question? Probably.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on that, the affiliation with UF was actually one of the things that, made the establishment of Ocam a successful story. Aside this financial benefits at the earlier stage, are there other benefits to this partnership with the University of Florida? Absolutely.
Ocam would not be here. This town is too small to support an actual project of this size. And economies of scale make sense here. You really wouldn't have this much space, common space activity. So we pull in, and I keep these stats each year, but last year about 40% of the people who moved in here had some tie to the school. We pull in a little over a third of our market comes from the town and the area here. A third comes from the state as a whole. Another third comes from outside the state. And they're drawn here to Gainesville, some of them never having been to here, just based on the power, wow, you are tied to a school. This integration with the school is not new among the world that I work in, but I believe we're one of the most integrated with our school. We have the most interactions with our school. There are some that just have the name of the school in the front. That's what I guess actually Florida State was heading towards, just having their name on it, and can you pay us a fee for the name, and they didn't want it. Here we have these actual agreements with all parts of the school, not all parts, but a lot, and some didn't do a thing, and some did a whole lot for us. I guess actually fitness center is staffed by people from the school, a contract with the school. The actual nursing, the actual clinic, they're all interactions with the school. Just last year, we were able to work with the IT of the school. We get some cloud space. We're able to store IT up there with them. We leased the office products, just like you do at the school there. We get it here too, and we're able to enjoy the pricing that you have at the school. There are other interactions there too. I mean, there's a whole host of things. There's, I'm sure people have talked about, I guess, the vet clinic. We have a little office over there that, students from the vet students can come over. Studies, we used to do this a lot more in the, I guess, before times, but they'd have folks that would look here for a pool of people who were actually willing to be part of a study, and there are people here willing to be part of a study. I mean, many of them have worked at the school and they're willing to jump in. We just completed a study with, I guess, actually CDC on, I guess, actually COVID, how it spreads through a group like this. And there were 4 or 5 spots like us that they had picked to kind of do, and we had 140 people actually participate in that range, twice more than all the other sites. I mean, people here are anxious to help and to dive in and to do these things. And again, it all goes back to the culture that comes out of the school too. Our board has 4 members that come from the school that are actually appointed by, I guess, actually president. So he'll pick 4 members to sit on our board, and that helps maintain the constant link. There are 4 people on the board, and they serve without terms that they stay on until he says it's time to come off on our board, which is kind of neat. Yeah, there wouldn't be an OCAMIC like this or at all without that link to the school. The school's name is what really gives people, that faith that there's a sponsor of some sort. Even though the school has no, I guess, responsibility for us in terms of, I guess, money. There's no link there now anymore. Maybe there was at the start. And we got to be very clear to that when we sell this place to folks, saying the school isn't behind us. We are an independent, we have the name on the door, and they've had people on our board, and we have all these links, but they are not supporting us in any way. Or we supporting them, which would be far, because they're much, much bigger.
So you mentioned earlier, you talked about the scholarship program, or not, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm curious as to do you have any other efforts to make OCAMIC financially accessible to folks, even if their assets run out outside of that, just any other methods?
So there are a large range of, I guess, units we have here. And even before we opened, the board was actually concerned to keep the price point on a lower end for some folks. And so they, about 6 months before we opened, we took 4 units stacked up in that building and cut them in half to make them smaller. Part of the upfront fee is based on how much square footage you get. So we have we have a small unit that's about 600 square feet as compared to the average unit, which is about 1,400 square feet. And the largest units are about 2,500 square feet. So they try to create a lower price point to try to do that. But it is kind of a hard thing because there is a lot of healthcare built into that fee. So the smaller units, they have a lower price point. Someone could get in with a little less wealth, a little less actual income, but it still is expensive. The average entrance fee here is probably about $450,000. The smallest unit will probably go for about $250,000. And there's a fee per month, but that fee includes everything. They're paying the power bill, the internet, the cable, the food, the housekeeping, actually security access to everything. But it is not cheap. It is, strangely enough, a little easier to get in the older you are, because part of our risk model is, well, how long will you live? How long do your assets need to last? And so the older one is, the less time there is on the clock. So it's, if you're 60 years old and you would like to come in, it's going to be harder than if you're 90 years old and you want to come in. Just because there's so much, the scale of the time on the clock that we have to make sure you have the assets to last. So it does cost less, or it would cost you less, in the long run, the older you are. But again, the way we get, our smallest price point really goes on having that smaller unit. Which has helped. And in some ways, the model too, one doesn't have to hold, there are some people come in with a whole lot of assets. Some people have no assets, but have income you wouldn't believe. They worked for somewhere, and I guess the pension's something unbelievable. You know, I've seen people with a pension of $10,000 a month, and I'm like, how do I get this pension? But and so they can afford to live here. It's not all just about having assets, it's not all about the income, but I have to do a test of the balance of the two. But it is not a product that's actually affordable, you know, to all levels. That price point is still still for someone that has built up some wealth or income during their lives.
I have another question. Okay. So you mentioned just now that that older folks may have an easier time living here because, you know, like you said, they have less time for, their assets may not, they have less time for it to last.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Sorry. The last people we spoke with said that the age for people moving in is a bit older now. Do you think that contributes at all?
You know, it hasn't moved. It is slowly trending up. The average age of people coming here is around 67 to 68. Last year, pardon?
Currently?
I'm sorry, 76 to 78. Sorry, I said 60, but I meant 76 to 78 is kind of the average age. It's been slowly trending up since we first opened. It was probably closer to 74 to 75. That being said, in any one year, last year the average was actually 75. We saw a blip down in the average age of people coming in. And we're trying to understand the data on that, why slightly younger people are coming in, and maybe a flight to safety. I guess with actually COVID out there, that maybe people who may have held off on the choice saying, I need to get somewhere safe, or at least somewhere I perceive as safe. And today, as of today, I don't think we have anyone on site with COVID. We haven't lost anyone during both waves to COVID, which is, you know, independent. You can see, but the health center, with all the horror stories we heard across the country, you know, we were very lucky, or very good, or very both, but we didn't lose anyone for COVID. But back to the question. So the average age, now I believe the perception of some people living here is that the average age is getting older because the overall average age is getting older. The group that moved in here, the big massive group that came in 2004, the average age in the independent living now is about 82. So when they moved in, the average age was around 75 to 6. So they're all getting older. I was updating my studies today, and I was talking to, I guess, the actuary that I work with, and strangely enough, this year our average age is dropping a little bit. I mean, just tiny, but it's something that blows your mind a little bit, because if you think about it, if we were all here for a year, we would all be a year older. But what happens is the oldest folks will pass, and the people come in are young. And so the average age doesn't move up a year each year. It ticks off maybe 0.2, 0.4 per year. This past year, it actually went down a little bit, which is, I've never really seen that happen. But again, it was just that effect. We had people who were younger move in this year. And of course, the people who are 100 are more, I guess, likely or prone to be the ones to leave us. And so you take off the older, you add that younger, and the average age goes down. It's still about 82. We will continue to age. The norm in this industry is probably closer to 85 to 86. We are a younger site, but compared to the people when they came in here, they were all 76. We look older now, and we should continue to trend up. Despite the fact every year we'll bring in about 24 new homes we'll sell in turn. Really part of this whole model is that, you know, we need to continue to sell units, and no one lives here forever. They'll be in the independent living for 8, 10 years, and then go over to the health center where they'll spend 2 or 3 years. On average, again, there are some people who will never set foot in there, and there are some people who may spend 10 years with Alzheimer's or something, and they've come to the right spot. You know, for some people, it is incredible how well it works out. You know, you have a spouse that can't care for the one spouse in the house, and yet they're right down the hall from them now, and they have all this help. They have the people in the health center that can care for that spouse. And the other spouse who's still well, you know, can help take care of themselves too, and still be close. It's when the model works out well like that, it's really a great thing. A lot of times, unfortunately, though, as I've seen over actually 30 years that I've, I guess, been doing this, people are actually reluctant more and more to move over to the healthcare side. People don't want to make that change. People don't want to move, and you can understand it, but there's so much more we can bring to bear there. And that's one of the things we're actually wrestling with now. You know, how to make that change a bit easier. It's tough. You're going from a big unit where you lived in 1,200 square feet, 1,600 square feet, down to 600 square feet. And, you're not quite, it's the same exact building. You can still walk each place, but it's still, people, any change like that, or to actually admit to yourself you're at that point that you need that help. Those that do it, it's a good thing. If you need help with any of those things that we do in life, getting out of bed, getting dressed, getting fed, taking your meds. We're all going to take our meds. But I digress. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yeah, so back to the question of the cost of living in this kind of community. What is the average monthly cost of living here?
So the average monthly fee is about $5,500, $5,600. That's been increasing about 3% per year, roughly. And it directly reflects the operating costs. So, we're basically passing on the cost of the food, the power, I guess actually insurance, but mostly the staff. Half of my operating cost of the staff. There are all the people we employ, about 360 people here, and that's the big part of the budget. The majority of the people who cook and care and clean, and even those that count the beans, accountants and such. But so it's about $5,600 and the average unit. So you could be in a larger home and be paying about $8,000 per month, which again, once you own it, you don't really own any of these homes. And so we take care of everything. With the fridge breaks, we fix it, replace it. We do the roof, we do the painting. There's housekeeping, security. You don't pay any bills on the house. These actually property taxes are all ours. The insurance on the house. As I said, I guess the power, water, sewer, the internet, the Wi-Fi, it's all included. It's all bundled into it. So you end up with just one bill for everything. Which, again, for the smaller units would be about 2,000-ish, 2,000 to 3,000. For a big unit, about 8,000. On average, about 5,600 per month.
That's great.
Very reasonable.
Yeah. So next to my next question would be, was there any pushback in starting this kind of living facility that you can recall? Was there any pushback from the community?
I don't believe so when they first built it. I recall them telling some of the stories when they were going to get it zoned, that some of these neighbors in the back, a few of them came out and kind of were concerned about what was going to happen to the land. I think after they actually described what we were going to do, there's a lot of green space that was left here and a lot of land that wasn't built on. And I think, again, I'm not telling this, it's actually firsthand from what I heard, that they were comfortable with what was going to be done here, that it wasn't going to be paved over, built, and wasn't going to be a lot of crazy students running around. I think there was a little bit of a pushback. I've worked in other places where there's been a heck of a lot more when you want to take a piece of land and do something like build a small town in it. But I think it wasn't that bad from what I heard. A few people came and voiced, and once they saw what it was going to be, and we're going to keep a lot of trees and keep a lot of green space, and they were pretty happy, I think.
So as the Hammock developed into what you initially imagined, or what the founding members or the board of directors, what they initially envisaged as it developed into it?
So I believe it has. It was slated to grow a little bit in its first years, but the crash of '08 kind of stopped that. We've never quite got back around to kind of expanding the size of it. We've expanded the health center as more of our people have aged and needed health care. The time came to kind of add more beds. When we first opened, there wasn't the need for the entire health center, and so they did not build it as big as it is now. I guess actually 42 skilled beds, and now it's 73. And so we had one expansion along the way, but I think the plans back at the very start had us adding on more homes and actually apartments, and that still may be out there. That's still something I guess we actually wrestle with. I guess the residents here wouldn't want anything to change, but I think for the long-term growth and health, or really the health, that I think we're going to have to do some growth. This, I guess, market has proved incredibly rich in the sense that there are a lot of people in this area who would like to live here. We're 99% sold, 97% filled. The average in the state of places like us is, I guess, like 91%-ish. I mean, we're very full from where our peers are. And one of the fears that I would have is that if we did not expand, do something to serve this market, that someone who would want to compete with us would say, this is a great market, I should build something right down the street. There are other products around that are like us, but not exactly encompassing the actual insurance aspect of the product that we have. I guess the actual village on the other side of town, it's a place that you rent, you don't pay an upfront fee, there's no skilled nursing and no, I guess, actually insurance product to it. But so we don't really compete with them in that sense. But if someone else came in with a product like this, that would scare me a little bit. It's a small town, and just for the general health, the more of these units I have to spread cost over, the less it costs per each unit, and you're able to do more to kind of secure or make the product better. There's always little things we're looking to add on, and they want to build a garden for this. I guess the bonsai garden, just little things you want to add on and do, and you want to make sure you have the access to the cash to get some of those things done, because some of them are expensive. The state mandated a few years ago after when the hurricanes went through South Florida, and some people at actually skilled nursing facility, were caught in it and they died. And they said, well, every skilled nursing facility in the whole state needs to have, actually backup power that does this. Well, being us, we decided we were going to build something that did this. And it cost about $1.6 million. But now when the power goes out, we can power our health center for 3 days. We can power both the skilled, the AL, and the main building here, and I guess the kitchen. Now, we're not on the coast. We don't have quite the same risks that they have down there, but it's being able to have the capital to do those things, both, for things they want to do and things we have to do. We don't want to skimp when it comes to the actual life safety. And that was a big investment. For the accountant to write a check for $1.6 million, it hurts. But it was good. I just hope, I hope we never have to use it. Power doesn't go out here as often as it does on the coast, or the hurricanes don't hit here as often, but still, it can happen. And it doesn't get quite as hot, but we don't want to share the same risks that someone would run. Of course, that was bad management too. We won't go there. I digress.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm about to ask something. So you just mentioned that the residents have something they want to do, like you said, the bonsai tree. Is that something that OCAM covers, or do the residents gather funds for that?
It's both. And in this case, they raised money themselves. We did a good bit of the work. We actually provided space, but they provided a little land right out by, the garden, where they could display and store, actually bonsai trees. So they have a club in here now that does bonsais, and I'm not sure how often they meet, but I've seen them in there, and they'll have classes and tapes to show how to make those little bonsai trees, and it's awesome. Incredible to watch. There's people out there with honeybees. There's a guy who was an actual professor of whatever you call the people who study bugs and bees and stuff, but he was a professor of that. Well, he brought some of his bees out here, and so every year they have a harvest, and they sell the honey from the bees to help raise money to kind of take care of what they have to do for the bees. So there's bees out there someplace. They have all kinds of little groups doing stuff like that. But it kind of depends, if they're going to do it themselves. Like the Art League, if you've noticed, there's a lot of artwork down here in that center. They usually raise that money themselves, and they give gifts out to, the students who come and bring art in. They have art shows. They do all kinds of things to kind of, actually promote art, but we provide the space, and we may provide the manpower to help move some of the art and care for it. As I said, I've opened up 7 or 8 of these places. I can't keep count now, but I've never seen a place that so embraces the arts. All the hallways you go down here, you'll see artwork placed on it. That's all theirs, and they take care of it. They place it. They have it in just the right spots, and they'll move them around. Places I've opened before, you'd walk down the hallways and there'd be a few pieces of, actually industrial art, so to speak, things that someone had picked out from the actual interior decorator and kind of put up there, and it hasn't changed. And I think someone once told me it's like 580 art pieces on the wall. And that's probably a swag, but there's that much art up there, and the art in the center here it will always change. Each month they have some other show going on. They'll bring people in, they'll actually do it themselves. And below us are, the classrooms where they do some of that art too. These actual studios, actually sewing room, there's a club for sewing. On my, balance sheet, I've got a little area for clubs where they'll have me hold their money for stuff, when they need to bite, checks in. I look down and it keeps getting longer. Let's recycle that. Here's the flag club. Here's the atrium club. Here's little clubs doing this. And so they'll raise money and pay for it themselves when it's something that a small group is doing. But if it's something that may help everybody, then or if it's something we all feel, for instance, I'm going to spend $4.8 million this year on all the capital X that goes in here, the CapEx. We're going to buy a new bus. We're going to be, let's buy a new bus, a better bus, a lift, and that helps everybody. But that's part of what we do here. It's part of we say we're going to provide transportation. They can take that bus and, they get dropped off at the front of the basketball games, front of these actual football games. Don't have to fight the students and the traffic and everything else. So it's kind of little perks on that part too, that they can kind of, not have to drive on that front. But so to answer the, I guess questions, when it's a lot of small things they'll just do themselves, but there are things that we also help, if it's just, providing space for them to do it, the classroom for it to happen, or, this actual venue, they'll bring in speakers into the big oak room here, or even to this room all the time, to kind of do things. And it may be something that, they brought in for free, it may be something they pay for, maybe something that's be a good class for us to host and to bring on in. So it's a little both.
Okay.
Yeah, my next question is, does the monthly or maybe yearly revenue cover the cost of running the Hammock, or you rely on donations, or?
So yes, the money we take in, my two main streams of money, people pay a big upfront entrance fee to move in, and they pay a fee per month. And that pretty much pays for everything. They will donate money for, I guess, the actually benevolent fund. We don't force anyone to give money into that fund, and they'll raise that themselves. I guess actually golf tournament, or just wills. And if I bring it up a lot, people will put it into their will, and maybe at the end of the day, I'll get a little bit of money that I'll put in there, and then again, that'll be used to help folks. They do other fundraising things too, like scholarships. They revamped our scholarship program about 1.5 years ago and raised like $100,000. So it's, so one of the perks we have, especially for students who come to work here, even if they're not going to be working here their lives, and most of them aren't, they'll come here to, be, I guess, the wait staff, they can apply and get scholarship money. And we have a lot of it. This is kind of funny to say, but they raised like $100,000 and it's didn't have enough people to give it away to. And each year they're kind of raising more. So I have a scholarship fund that we're kind of hoping to entice staff in with, because we don't have enough staff. COVID, before COVID we were doing okay, stressed in some areas, but not much. But during COVID and now especially, it's been hard to get people back into some jobs. The scholarship fund, that wasn't their first thought to help, I guess bring them in, but it hopefully will be a way to appeal to students who just need that student job while they're here at school, and there's been some really, really nice gifts given for scholarships. But otherwise, where your question was, we're pretty much, what we make on the entrance fees, what we get on those fees per month, what we make on the health center fees. The health center also, we do a lot of work with Shands and with we'll have people from the outside who aren't our people that come in just for short-term stays. They're getting Part A work done, Part B work done. So there's outsiders who come into the health center because it's the best one in town, but they want to come here. They've just had their hip break, whatever, these extra surgery, these extra soldier, and they'll be here for a month. And so we'll make money on that. And then we make money on the cash we have in the bank. So we invest our money, and whenever we've actually accumulated or held, we'll also bring in $2 million a year is probably what I made the last few years. Probably not this year because it's a bad year for the stock market. I guess looks like. But there's also, so we make money on what is actually invested from funds that have come, and that model will sustain itself if we do our job right.
Yeah. So earlier on during this conversation, you talked about the ILR. Could you tell us more about it? Institute in, I guess, actually learning in retirement. Yeah.
So the ILR is a program that kind of is run by the residents and partially by people who don't live here too. It's a group that wants to bring classes in, I guess, for actually seniors, and it goes back to the earliest days of OCAM. And so they basically set up classes, 3 terms per year, I believe, 2. And they pick speakers, they'll raise money, and they'll bring speakers in here. And so anyone at OCAM can go to it, and people from off-site can come in too. So it's kind of a great little tool to kind of bridge the gap between folks that are here and folks who aren't here. And they've had some wonderful speakers. They get people from the school to come and speak, people from town, people from all over. And they'll small actually classes, big classes, all kinds of, I guess, topics. I mean, I've kind of poked my head into a few of them and be like, it's actually Russian literature, and yet it's full. You know, there's people with enough of this interest. Actually, foreign, it's actually relations. Bob Graham, I guess, used to speak at it all the time. You know, he would come in and packed house for that. But it's a very, very neat thing in that sense that it brings, I guess, actually lifelong learning aspect of what we do, you know, very much into focus. That lifelong learning, they run it, they pick the classes, they bring these actual speakers in, we have the space. It's also, on the other end for us, kind of a great sales tool, because I'm able to get people who come in here who haven't seen OCAMIC before, and most people don't know what OCAMIC is. Especially if you're students on here, you probably hadn't heard of OCAMIC much before this, I guess, project. You know, we're here in town, and yet there's 500 people who live here, but not many people know we're back here in the woods. So it's a nice bridge for those people who may one day live here, or can talk about being here and come, hey, I just went to a class on, I guess, like foreign relations, and I went to this place called OCAMIC, and it's pretty neat, you know, and it may be something that, you know, gets into their minds down the road when they want to make the choice to come here. Because again, it's not for everyone, but we, you know, we are constantly having to sell. We, you know, part of this model is that, you know, each year is about 24 of those units we have to resell because someone's either moved to the health center or moved on. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, okay. I was going to say that. So we actually know the OCAMIC anyway. We work the summer Proctor program. We kind of, our director comes in here, you know, take lectures. So we really do know the OCAMIC.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. Isn't there a long waiting list? Is that right?
So there is a good-sized, I guess, waiting list, but it's a little funny in some ways that there are some people who are on this list that like, I'm going to be ready in 2 years. I'm going to be ready in 3 years. So they're on a list, or they may be on a list saying, I'm ready when you have something on the 4th floor that points south, or I'm going to be ready when Sue passes because I really want her unit. That's probably a little over the top, but you know, they get, you know, specific, but there are, you know, it's getting tougher for people to get in because we don't have that many, I guess, units that are empty. So there are some folks, I guess, willing to give up saying, I'm not going to wait for so-and-so to pass or this to happen or being on the 4th floor. I just want to get in. But there's about, oh gosh, I'm tempted to say 200 people who put down a little bit of money to be on a list and kind of waiting. But again, some of them just really are saying, I'm going to be ready in 3 years. I'm going to be ready in 5 years. And some people wait too long. Another thing, you have to be able to live in the independent living unit when you come in. So I screen them for making sure they have the wealth to be able to live here and hopefully not need help. But we also want to screen them that when they come in, they're capable to live in the independent living. They're not going to come in here and suddenly have to go over to the health center. Because part of the risk on that is suddenly, you know, we've got much more of a healthcare cost, the insurance side of it. So you've got to be able to live in the independent living. Someone may, I'd love to live here, and then something happens and they don't qualify. They couldn't live in the independent living on their own, and they've kind of missed that chance. So we're struggling with that. You know, what's the right age to, I guess, move in? It's a big move for a lot of people. It really is. You know, when you think about it, it's that I'm going to be making that last move, and I'm moving into an area with lots of these neighbors, and I'm close to them, and will we get along? And that's why things like the ILR are great. It gives you a chance to test drive what the actual social life is here too. I say they come here for, I guess, actually insurance piece, because that's what I do behind the scenes, but it's actually socialization. You know, it's socialization. When we get older, sometimes it's easy to isolate, or it gets easier. You lose friends and family, there's space, it's, I guess, the distance, but here you can see all your friends in the hall as you walk down to eat or go to the store. And it becomes a small town or a big family. You know, it depends on who you are and how you kind of fit into it. But the actual socialization piece, if I had to really peel it all back, that's what really appeals and sells to some folks. You know, you're back to living in the dorms again, you know, and you remember in the dorms, you knew your next door neighbors pretty well. At least I did back in the day. But you're kind of back in that environment where you're really kind of getting, you get closer to people, or you have the opportunity to. There are still some folks who will still isolate themselves, and we'll do our best to draw them out. You know, oh, there is a class on something you really want to learn. Why don't you come to this class, or why don't you come to that? You know, we do our best to get them to engage, but you know, there are sometimes tough folks who are dealing with a lot of issues. You know, at that point in life, we tend to turn inward a little bit more, and we need to take care of our needs, and things start to change. Socialization, though, very important, very important.
Yeah, that's very key
Yeah.
in a community like this.
Yeah,
So it seems like there are like different categories of care units. Could you talk about it briefly, like the care units available? So you mentioned in
the care units.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're actually licensed with two big pieces: the skilled nursing facility, and I guess actually assisted living. And within those, there are other subparts of it, whatever. But those two areas, it's actually licensed in two. One is a higher level of care. Skilled care is costs a lot more, but you have a nurse. It's almost like a skilled nursing facility, like I guess actually a hospital room. It's almost, this is someone who needs a lot of help, and they need a nurse nearby just in case. They may not be able to get out of bed. They may not be able to walk. I guess actually assisted living is not a high level of care. So you're in a room that's more like an apartment. It's not like the hospital bed. You're living on this furniture it's your own stuff in there. But there is a nurse right down the hall, and there are people to help you get out of bed. There are people to help get you down the hall, to get you fed, to help you take your meds, which is very important. That's one of those key things you can do there that we can't do out in the IL. We can't go out and help people take their meds in the IL because, well, it's the law. Other people can with that license can, but so you may just need some help with your ADLs, activities of, I guess, actually daily living. So at this point, I need someone to help me get out of bed, get dressed, get whatever. But otherwise, I can get around and take care of things, and I'm in a place that keeps me safe. Skilled care is much higher. Within the ALF, we have a lockdown unit for folks, I guess, with Alzheimer's types of things that I guess would wander, that if you didn't have them in a place where they couldn't get out, they may hurt themselves. So there's kind of a one unit with two pods that are locked down for those folks that, would wander off if they could see a door and would be this, I guess, dangerous. So they bring activities into them that kind of suit that level and that need. At some point they might be skilled, as I guess actually disease will progress and they could move to skilled. But once they're at that point that they could wander, or what do they call it? I guess actually elope. They need them in a space where they can make sure they don't. So there is that kind of lockdown unit within the ALF, assisted living facility. Within the skilled, there's also an area that does short-term work, like for people who had a hip, I guess, replaced, came out of this hospital and they need a few weeks to get actually therapy and to get better. So they're not here to stay. They're here to get better and get out. And a lot of that work goes through and goes on there. So it's to actually rehab people. The other part of it is really for people there for a long-term stay. They're in skilled and they will probably not be leaving the skilled. They'll be there for an average of a year or two and then they'll pass. So that's kind of the long-term stay care portion. Someone, it's actually chronic, whatever they have, and they're not able, nor are they able to take care of themselves as well as they could in, I guess, the ALF. And some people end up there and some people don't. So we need to take care of ourselves and have good genes, or I don't know.
That's great to know that, there are different categories and different facilities, care facilities.
And there's even more of a breakdown than that. I'm not actually clinical as some of my other teammates might be, but that's how I see it, and that's how we kind of, I guess, bill it. It is interesting, having done this for so long, to see I will meet someone who's actually 85 years old and in the best of health. They're actually playing tennis and they could whip me at tennis, and they're out there and they're doing great. And someone who's actually 70 and barely actually getting by. And, you've always wondered, is it your genes? Is it what you've done with your genes? And I haven't found an answer to that yet. Is it half and half, or is it, just that luck, of what happens, what we're born with and what we do with what we're born with. Because it is, there's a broad spectrum that happens.
It could be a mix of both. It could be both.
I actually suspect it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Question?
Oh, no, I just said I agree.
So I'm just going to ask a question about, how does Hammock relate with the Gainesville community at large, aside the University of Florida, of course? How do they engage with the community?
Well, on our board, there are actually people from the town. So the board makeup bring the bylaws that there has to be 4 people from town as well on the board, and 4 people who went to the school, and then there's a couple of people who live here that are on the board. So they try to keep those strong links with the town by having board members who are from the town have to be on the board. And that's one of the key ways to kind of maintain a link. Other than that, we participate in a lot of activities and things here in the town, both with the school and with the town. I mean, our folks here are always engaged in trying to raise money or help or do stuff with, different things on town on their own. Now, OCAMIC as a corporation, again, we're engaged in the sense that, all of our employees come from the town and from the area. We all have that kind of link there. We try to keep up with, I guess, the actual civic organizations that we can, the actual Rotaries and others to kind of keep us engaged. I myself have to deal with, town hall and I guess the county whenever I have to issue bonds or debt, that I've got to go down and kind of work with the politics of the world as we issue debt through the city and the county as these actual conduits. Not to go too far into the depths of how we do that kind of stuff. So we're very much engaged in that sense that we are, I guess, actually dependent upon, the actual good graces of being able to go through, I guess, the politics of both, I guess, the city and the county. So I'm hopefully there's a high level of participation. But again, as we said before, it seems like maybe not enough if, we feel our name isn't quite known out there as well as it should. Certainly anything that actually civic happens, you may see the OCAMIC bus show up at any show or play or anything going on there. But, and there's a lot of things that we do sponsor to help get our name out to and I guess to support stuff. But a lot of times, if you're not looking for a place like OCAMIC, you'll just see OCAMIC go by and you're like, I don't know what that was. OCAMIC sounds like a place to live, I guess. But, again, you get back in here and it's so much more. It's this whole little town in and of itself, trying to be part of Gainesville as a whole. And there are, of course, a lot of people who live here who have been long-time folks who have lived in town. I mean, I guess former mayors of town and people, both from the school and from the town that have deep, roots and links. So we have that kind of, on the individual level, there are a lot of people here who are, very much engaged. And I know you already interviewed one of the guys who helped set up Bruce Delaney.
Yes.
But, I'm thinking his family goes back here forever, it seems. And he, whenever we're talking about land or whatever, I know who owns that piece of land and that piece of land and that piece of land. And so there are a lot of links on that front. But, it's one of those interesting questions because you always wonder if you could be doing more, to kind of both, be part of the town. Because it is sometimes our own little world back here.
Yeah. So, more question?
I don't have any on the top of my mind.
Okay, I think my final question for you.
Final question.
Final question.
Final
definitely.
Jeopardy.
So what do you think is unique about the OCAM compared to other, you mentioned you've, had experience with, setting up other retirement communities. So what would you consider to be?
So there are probably 2 kind of neat aspects here, different from some of the places I've helped open before, and the link to the school and how deep that link is compared to, 3 of the places I helped open up were for the Army, Air Force, and the Navy, and very different group here. The group here is very different too. Very independent. These are people with neat lives. So not that there aren't at the other side, but there's just a neat. Maybe it's the school pulling in, I guess, the academics. The folks who like to think through, plan, and so the population here is special. The link to the school is special. And I certainly find that, this actual program is actually developing is again, very different from some of the other places that I've worked. The focus on this lifelong learning. All sites seem to have something like that here too, but here it's more than just a few classes. It goes very deep. And I'm hoping that can be kept too, because, one of the things I said earlier is we're actually younger than a lot of our peers. And I'm hoping as people age a bit more that we don't lose the strength, the manpower, the energy. Folks have already thought about some of the clubs and things that were here when it actually first opened aren't as active as they once were. And we kind of fear that the aging of OCAMIC is something we don't want to lose, that, we want people to stay active because there's an energy and engagement here that I think is at a higher level than other places I've opened. As an easy catch-all why we're different. And of course, the wonderful staff. Oh, in the accounting department, don't get me started. Those accountants down there, they're just wonderful.
Wow. That's great to know. So, just finally, do you have any comments or questions? Or
No, I
anything
think
you'd
this
like
is
us
such
to
a great
know?
thing.
Yeah.
For many years now, I've actually been talking to the board about, we need to kind of write down and kind of capture the history, because many of the people that were around then, even before me, aren't around now. And I've seen other places do that too, where they kind of write a small book about the history of, how we got here, because 10 years from now, there's even going to be less of these people around. And it'd be kind of nice to know, to keep or even the idea of keeping this up, to come back and say 10 years from now, how has Ocam changed and grown? There are a lot of people, you could talk to anyone here and they've got life stories that you could do a whole class on. We've got, I guess, the governors and senators. There was a chief justice of the state actual Supreme Court that lived here. I'm just, people with all kinds of, stories, and God, it'd be great to interview them. But the idea of keeping Ocam's history, I think this is a great idea. And when Ed kind of brought it up, I'm like, yes, we need to do that. I've even talked to the board about having someone be the actual historian, so to speak. But our board, I think our oldest board member's only been on for like 6 years. There really isn't anyone that goes back to the early days. You may be interviewing some of the early ones here, but no, wonderful. It's a wonderful idea, and I look forward to seeing what the others have said. I'm kind of scared about what I said. Andrew said that, and that's not right. But thank you so much for, I guess, doing this, and it's been a great interview, Press. Thank you for prompting me with questions and not letting me completely ramble on.
Thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
you.
Cut? No. All right.